Hello everyone, and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. Oh, sorry, should I say Tadias, everyone, and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. That is hello, or at least one of the ways, apparently, to say hello in Ethiopia. It's crazy, on YouTube there's this whole section of these videos talking about how to say hello in different languages, and nearly every single one of the videos has got a ridiculously high dislike to like ratio. It's nuts. So this one, for example, is 50-50, so I don't know if that's right, that's just me repeating it back. But anyway, hi guys, welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. The footage in the background from today comes from me. This is Guild Wars 1 footage. I had a lot of comments of people saying that this could be a good idea because a lot of us have seen Guild Wars 2 footage by this point. If you don't like the idea of Guild Wars 1 footage being on there for when we're doing server episodes, which is what this is going to be, let me know and we can swap back to Guild Wars 2 stuff. It would be easier for me, to be honest, to do Guild Wars 2 stuff. But what you're going to be seeing in the background there, and from future server episodes as well, if you continue to like this, is actually the places that I'm talking about. So for today, I'll be speaking about 3 different servers, and my plan is to then go in game and get you guys footage of these areas, and it will be edited on the screen so you can see what you're looking at that time. So should be cool. But this is the plan for today. We're doing servers. I've got 1 European server and 2 American ones, so we'll start with the American one, then go to Europe, and then go back to America. The first one really that we can start off with, and a few of the ones here are smaller areas as well. One thing I think I should stress before we really go into this whole server series is don't try to be tempted just by servers that have got really cool, deep, interesting lore implications from the first game, because that's not necessarily what they're all going to have. A lot of them are just normal places that you found in Guild Wars 1, and I don't think that they stand a fair chance if we're all judging how good these server names are just on how important to lore some of these places are. You know, actually just consider whether this sounds like a cool place and whether it's kind of up your alley, because I think that's probably more fair. Otherwise we're just going to have everyone go into places like Arachnia Plateau and Augury Rock and stuff like that. So in any case, the first one that I wanted to talk about is the Astralarium. We've actually got 3 ones in Nightfall. That's complete coincidence, but all 3 of the locations I'll be talking about today are from Nightfall. This is the first one, the Astralarium. This is a place that you would find very early on in game in Nightfall. Very early. It was one of the earliest outposts you would manage to go to on the original island in Istan, in the nation of Istan. It's the very lush, tropical and fertile lands of Istan. The nation with the powerful navy that exists on an island to the south west of all of Elona. This is the people from here, and this is where the Astralarium is. It's where you started Guild Wars Nightfall, and this was one of the earlier outposts you got to go to while you're on that region. I'll read you guys the in-game description which we got from it, since it's an outpost that you could go to. The Astralarium, sitting high atop the bluffs of northern Istan, is home to the astronomically oriented Order of the Sky. This open-air laboratory with its multiple solar reflectors and pedestal-mounted astrolabes is the centre of astrological and astronomical study in Elona. Scholars from all 3 provinces, that would be Corner, Vabi and Istan, flock to Zelon Reach to study under the stars at the Astralarium and try to divine the meaning of ancient dark prophecies. Zelon Reach is the name of an explorable area that's very close to the Astralarium. It's just outside of it, and it's this place apparently that lots of people got to go to. There's some interesting stuff about this. For a start, when prophecies came out and we got to go to Tyria, there really wasn't anything to do with this idea of people studying the skies and stuff. We just didn't get it. It came forward a bit in factions, particularly to do with the Celestials. That was kind of a big part, but even there didn't seem to be very much explicit mentioning of, you know, a place where people were looking at the stars. And then in Nightfall, quite early on, we actually find that there is this place here that it's established that this is where people are going to look and divine meanings from the stars and find out kind of, I guess, Tyria's place within the universe. It's really kind of cool. Obviously it's a fantasy game, so this idea of astrological study being something that learned people would do is quite cool, I think. So stuff like, I suppose, horoscopes and things like that, if that really translates into Tyria, into the Guild Wars universe, which by the way we've never necessarily heard of. We just know that astrology is a thing in the Guild Wars universe. This is kind of where people would go for that, and these were kind of noble and interesting things for the smart people to be looking at. The actual scholars in game, this is one of the places that they really would have gone to. It was this really cool place because early in Nightfall, a lot of the areas, it was all very deserty, and it was, you know, the hot sun beating down on you all the time. But when you came into this outpost, it was always night there. So obviously, because this place is supposed to be about the sky, and you could kind of look up, and it all very felt like the air was quite thick with magic, and it just seemed quite interesting and cool. It was like you would be there and you'd kind of learn, oh, this is where people are looking at at the stars, and at the same time you could kind of understand why they were doing that and why they were trying to divine these meanings of magics and things. Around there you could see there were all these kind of animated spinning apparatus. I mean, in the description here it says with its multiple solar reflectors and pedestal mounted astrolabes. It really was a very unique looking place, and I'm sure you'll be able to decide that for yourself on the screen during the video. But yeah, I really quite like the look of the area. It wasn't a particularly interesting place for really standout quests or anything, I suppose. There was a lot of activity there with other players, so it was somewhere that you could go and it would be quite well populated. Even today the game's dying quite a lot, but I would still wager you'd have a pretty good chance of finding people around there just because it's so early on in the plot and there's so many people there. It tended to be quite populated. A pretty cool place. You could get a certain mission that would start from there, but really the most interesting thing to me is the idea that it's the home to these people called the Order of the Sky. In Nightfall we were introduced to the Order of the Sun Spears, which were this really big part of the storyline and we were most familiar with. But here we actually hear about this other order that was based in Istan, the Order of the Sky, and it's very easy to miss any lore about them, but actually these guys, shortly before Nightfall began, in the year 1075, they were actually approached by some Cornins, in particular a powerful general of Varish Ossa, who was kind of in charge of the Cornins at the time. But one of these really powerful generals was this woman called General Kayet, and she was quite old by the time you got to meet her in game. But she basically had helped raise Varish Ossa, the leader of the Cornins, and she had taught her about myths and legends and all the interesting old stuff that used to exist in the world, and she was quite absorbed in dark magics and things. And she, in some ways, I suppose you could say, is what sparked that in Varish Ossa. And anyway, she went to this order, these people, the Order of the Sky, this general of Varish Ossa, to learn about Nightfall, which is this, at the time, was just kind of known as this really old ancient prophecy that no one really knew whether it was legend or what. But Kaya had been learning about it, and she came to the Order of the Sky to learn more about it. And in fact, one of the really main characters from Nightfall was there too at that time, Meloni, who's one of these big characters that ended up joining her team. So these are the guys that lived here. This is kind of some of the people that first taught the big bad guys of Nightfall about that event. They taught them about Nightfall, and you could kind of say these people knew, obviously, quite a lot, and it's interesting to wonder what else they might know. So if you kind of consider yourself to be someone that's quite into the universe of Tyria and maybe the physical universe, I would say, not, anything to do with the mists and stuff like that. We like the idea of, these scholarly people. This is kind of where they came to hang out, at least in Elona. Obviously, in Guild Wars 2, we've got this amazing, observatory in Divinity's Reach, and there's going to be more of this coming through. I think it would be very cool if we got to meet the Order of the Sky, or these people, again, in Guild Wars 2. Maybe not just when an Elona expansion comes out, but how about at the launch of the game? Maybe we could find them there in Divinity's Reach, and they'll talk about it. That would be really cool. But yeah, there you go. That's what one server's named after, the Astralarium. Let's jump over to the EU servers for a second. The EU server I've picked for today, I'm just working down the list, so we're in German stuff at the moment, is Dasha. Dasha is an interesting name for a server because there was nothing specifically in Guild Wars 1 called Dasha, and it's difficult to know exactly what they're referencing when they say Dasha. But here is basically the gist of what they're talking about and where it is. In Vabi, so one of the other nations here in Elona, these are all in Nightfall at the moment. So in Vabi, there is this great massive city that is completely and utterly hidden, like inside some mountains. It's not necessarily all indoors, but it's surrounded, I guess the idea is, on all sides by these huge mountains, and it is mostly underground as well at the same time. And the only way to get to this giant hidden city that's full of riches and all these beautiful vistas and incredible sights, the only way to get there and to reveal its location basically is to interact and get through the defenders of the city, which are the Jinn. The Jinn I can talk about in a whole different episode. There could be a spotlight at some point, the Jinn of Nightfall. But basically the Jinn protected this city and they kept it hidden, and the city was created originally back during when Palawa Joko was ruling over Elona, as he was basically in charge of everywhere except for Corner. So when he owned Vabi, there was this giant city was essentially constructed and put into the hands of the Jinn to protect the princes of Vabi. So they have their merchant princes, and since that time when it was created to help hide the princes from Palawa Joko, it had been used ever since, and it was this place that the princes could go to hide and be safe in upcoming disasters. And that's precisely what happens during Nightfall. When the actual events of Nightfall really kick off. Varus also gets into some serious power, and Nightfall, the actual event, begins to occur and everything starts to fall into darkness. There are 3 merchant princes, and 2 of them just crap themselves. They realise, oh god, what can we do? And they run off and they hide in this hidden city. The 3rd one foolishly decides he's going to try and fight Vareshosser and Corner on his own. And you actually get a choice in the storyline of Nightfall. Who do you want to help? Do you want to go to this one rogue prince that has stood up and hasn't been a coward, and you go and help him? Or do you go into the city to find the other 2 princes that are being cowards and convince them to come and join the good fight? So if you choose to go and find the other 2 princes instead of helping the other one defend his fortress, you actually have to find your own way into the city, which is being defended by the Jinn, and see you as an intruder. So you get this fantastic plot, this part of the story where you then break into the city, and it feels very much like a kind of Indiana Jonesy style thing. You'll basically go into this giant area that you're raiding through, and there's loads of traps and puzzles to participate in to actually climb your way through, and finally you defeat these really powerful Jinn at the end before you can finally get to the princes, which is really cool. It's a really awesome place. Once you've completed the mission in the storyline, you have complete access to the hidden city from then on, and it really is quite a sight. It's one of my favourite places in Nightfall. There's a giant room in there that's just full to the brim with gold and riches, and some really cool quests around there as well, where you're looking for something called the Gift of the Jinn, and the person you're with, the NPC you're with, believes it's this great treasure that he can find in the hidden city, and you go in raiding it, basically trying to find eternal riches. And finally, when you get to the location this guy thought that the Gift of the Jinn was waiting, he realises he's read it wrong, and it's in fact just Gift of Jinn. So instead of getting all these treasures, just a bunch of Jinn appear and start to attack you, and you've got to flee. And it's a really cool quest. There's also a very cool quest that happens around there to do with the birth of a salt spray dragon as well, which is very cool. We talked about that when we did a spotlight about a month ago now, actually. But yeah, so it's a very cool place. It is a really mystical, interesting idea, especially the cutscene, which I'm hoping you'll see on the video, where you actually get to break into there and you see it, the entranceway appear in the cliff. Really cool. I really did like it in the hidden city. For as far as gameplay was concerned, it was one of those areas that could be quite difficult because the Jinn were very good at doing AoE nuke damage, and you couldn't summon minions out of their corpses. But aside from that, it was generally a very enjoyable place to explore, even if the gameplay could be a little bit harder there. And it's one of the areas I'll remember for a long time, I'll say that much. Anyway, the actual server in Guild Wars 2, as I said, is named Dasha, and what I've just been talking about is the Hidden City. Now, the full name of the Hidden City is called the Hidden City of Ahdashim, and Dasha kind of fits into that name a little bit. And further, the actual entrance into this city, once you get through into the cliffside, which reveals the entrance, when you're in there, you're kind of in this giant atrium place, and that's called Dasha Vestibule. So when they're referencing Dasha as a server for Guild Wars 2, they could be talking about the atrium area, which is just Dasha Vestibule in Guild Wars 1, or they could be talking about Ahdashim, the city as a whole. It's not entirely clear, but that whole general area, that is basically what they're getting at there. And I suppose the idea might be that in lore, just that whole general region is known as Dasha, perhaps the the hidden city of Dasha or Ahdashim, or however the people might be remembering it. But it's very cool. It's this awesome, mysterious place, and one of the more memorable missions in Nightfall. Definitely, I really do enjoy that kind of Indiana Jones style thing. It's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to joining the Dermot Priory, because apparently their whole plot arc is very similar to that kind of stuff, which should be quite fun. Back over to the US servers now for the last one. Again, we are still in Nightfall. The next server is called the Basalt Grotto. This is, unlike Dasha, this is a specific reference to a place in Guild Wars 1. In Nightfall, there is an outpost that's kind of hidden out in the middle of nowhere called the Basalt Grotto. If you remember recently, I was talking about Icetooth Cave being one of my favourite outposts, because it was just this hidden area that no one ever really appeared at, and you could always sit down and you just feel like you had some... And you could always sit down and you could feel like you could meet people there because it was so rare to find someone. Basalt Grotto is really the Nightfall version of this, and it's quite funny actually, because on the wiki when I was reading about it just now, when I was having a look over just now, on the discussion page, there was someone who said this is the best town in the game, and the other person who replied said no, that honour goes to Icetooth Cave. It really is kind of the Nightfall version of Icetooth Cave. It's a place that you can totally skip. It's very easy to miss in Nightfall the main storyline, because while with Prophecies it was a very large world and the storyline took you through just a thin part of it, you kind of got used very quickly in Prophecies to the fact that the story wouldn't take you everywhere. However, in Nightfall they were much better at condensing it together. The main campaign takes you through pretty much everything, and it seems weird that you might miss a whole outpost in Nightfall, because you get to go, the main story is so involved and takes you over so many corners of the continent. But this place here, really, the Basalt Grotto, it's at the end of an explorable area that in itself is totally and utterly optional, and the other side of the Basalt Grotto is very rare for someone to actually be able to get there. There's not really that many quests around there. Some of the more interesting quests in Nightfall actually do exist there. You learn a lot about the Master of Whispers, the leader of the Order of Whispers, around that general area. But at the grotto itself, there's no quest givers. There's a couple of guys that offer certain services, but nothing you wouldn't find elsewhere. Really, it's just this big craggy, rocky outpost out in the middle of nowhere that connects the desolation to Vabi. In lore, this is the place that Palawa Joko used to sneak up on the Vabians all that time ago and actually be able to assault them and attack them through their mines. You know, so he bypassed their defenses. Specifically, once you're actually in game, this is what the description of the outpost says. It has long been rumoured that there exists a safe passage between the Desolation and Vabi, a passage discovered and used to brutal effect by Palawa Joko when he invaded. The winding passages of the grotto are known to but few, who guard that knowledge zealously out of fear or greed. So it's this really strategically important location. It's the place that was key to the downfall of Vabi in the first place. And as far as Guild Wars 2 is concerned, I'm curious about what it might be like in 250 years, whether Palawa Joko used it a second time over. That would be very cool if that's kind of what he did to help establish dominion over there in the years spent. Don't forget, a big part of Palawa Joko actually ruling over Elona in the 250 years when Guild Wars 2's come by is because he dammed the River Elon, which started really in Vabi and flowed through the whole continent and provided much of the life and fresh lands for the whole continent. And he just dammed that straight away in Vabi, and now you can see it flowing north through the Crystal Desert. So I wonder if the Basalt Grotto is maybe now even flooded by the River Elon. That would be an interesting idea too. But it was this cool area. It was an outback area. It was very much supposed to feel desolate and empty. It's right on the edge of the Desolation, which of course is the sulphurous waste that no one can really travel across, no mortals, and it just kills everything. It's right there on the edge of really lush and rich Vabi, just beyond their mines basically, and on the edge of the Desolation. So you really can feel, it's just as you're leaving Vabi and everything starts to feel a bit scary and a bit weird, and it was a very, very important place. I mean, a whole army of undead had marched through there at some point. And I love this line about how people guard the knowledge jealously or out of fear. It's really this really cool idea. But very remote location, again, much like Icetooth Cave, a bigger outpost than Icetooth Cave, so really I've never spent much time there like trying to socialise. The most I ever thought about the Basalt Grotto was when I used to be into the concept of racing in Guild Wars 1. People could race through explorable areas and see how fast they could get from one place to another. And there is an actual theoretical way that you can go from a place in Prophecies called the Marhan's Grotto, and you can run without using the map all the way from there to the Basalt Grotto, and that was always a very interesting concept to me, like this really long marathon you could do through two of the whole continents in the campaigns, and it would go through a ridiculous amount of explorable areas and who could get there first. But aside from that, really there's not much that goes on there, but maybe that's something that you like the idea of. It was a cool place, it was an important place, but not a place that many people went to, so yeah. In any case, there you go guys, that's Guild Wars 2 Daily, 3 servers, and it took us about 20 minutes. That's pretty crazy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, tell me about the footage in the background. I'm more than willing to swap back to Guild Wars 2 footage, just let me know. In any case, thanks again, and I guess I will see you tomorrow.